These are some good general questions about studying for the Level 1 CFA exam, and my answers to them I thought would be beneficial for a lot of people. I've seen several of these questions come up time and time again. So we got permission from this subscriber to share his questions and then my answers back to him. I think they're really applicable for a lot of other people because of the amount of times that you've seen these same questions out there on other message forums, YouTube channels, whatever. And a lot of people email me with these similar questions, so I appreciate that type of stuff. If you ever had anything you want to ask me, leave it in the comments of this video down below or send me an email. The link's in my channel bio. I'll always get back to you on those, but here were some good ones, so let's get into it. The first question was, when you're using Kaplan or Wiley, or any third-party test prep provider for that matter, and you're using their study notes while following along with their video lessons, is it worth your time to be creating summaries of those topics for revision? Or in my words, is it worth your time to be taking notes on those topics? I get where this question is coming from because it can seem really redundant when you're watching a video lesson and listening to an instructor show you something and you're following along in the written notes that instructor has provided you with to do your learning and do your studying. Do you have to take more time to then either pause the video and write your notes or try to write your notes alongside following along with the written notes? It seems redundant. And if you want to be reading word by word those instructor provided notes, then you would have to pause the video and double the amount of time you're using to rewrite your own notes. Is that necessary? My answer was yes. You still need to be writing your own summaries or writing your own notes for a couple reasons. Number one is it requires you to stay focused. At least for me, I know it was too easy to watch a video lesson, especially putting it on 1.5 times speed, and have the instructor notes up in front of me that I'm looking at while I'm listening to the video, and I'm watching the instructor do the math and answer a question and explain why it's answered in a certain way, and then I look at their notes, which is basically what they're rewriting on the screen. The act of doing those things was just a little bit too passive for my brain anyway, and it would allow me to drift off into getting distracted and thinking about other things just a little bit too often. If you're doing 3 hours a day, you want it to be 3 good hours, not 2.5 hours a day. So rewriting those notes or writing a paraphrased version of them in a way that is more easy for me to understand, it helps you learn the material, but it also requires you to stay focused. And that helped me a lot in making sure that I was handwriting everything out because I was staying focused on what I was learning. The other reason that the answer is yes, and potentially the more important reason, is that when you go back to memorize the formulas that you're going to need to memorize in the final week before the exam, it's going to be very helpful if you have somewhere in your written notes that you've kind of earmarked towards, hey, look at this. This is an important formula that I used to answer a few questions in this chapter when I was learning the material. If you are using Kaplan or Wiley, you likely have access to their formula sheets, which can be helpful. But if you're using any other third-party test prep provider, you might not have any formula sheets at all. And the formula sheets still are not perfect because they include way more information than you actually need to memorize to be able to answer enough questions right on the exam. And if you've seen these formula sheets before, you'll just know what I'm talking about. They're extremely complex and detailed. They're not something you can really commit to memory in a matter of 2-3 days, like I recommend candidates do in the final 2-3 days before the exam. So you're going to want somewhere to go to where you've highlighted all the formulas that you had to use to answer any blue box, EOCs, practice questions, whatever. And what I did was made a thick bold line next to each one so that in the final couple weeks before the exam, I flipped through all my notes in the notebook that I had, and any formula that I'd ever used to answer a practice exam through the CFA material or the third-party test prep provider was designated that way. I knew exactly what formulas to put on my formula sheets. This next question is a really big factor in how people study for the CFA exams, and the best answer might be a little bit different for everyone depending on how you learn, but that question is, how often should you be going back to review the previously studied material, old material that you did maybe 1, 2, 3 or more months ago? And my answer was never. Here's the thing, you're gonna forget a lot of the information in your short and medium term memory anyway. So even if you're going back to something every 60 days, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I'm glad I remember it now. It is in that review process that you can restore that information in your short-term memory, which is the type of memory that you need the information in to be able to pass the exam. So the key is going to be learning that information well enough during your first pass so that when you definitely forget it in the coming week or month or 3 months or 6 months, that you aren't going to see that information again in when you're doing your final review in the last 4 or 6 weeks before the exam and you're doing a lot of practice exams. The information will start to seem familiar again. You're going to have forgotten it and you'll relearn it. hopefully you had a strong enough foundation so that it is just a quick review of the information. You don't have to relearn it, but you review it and you go, oh yeah, I remember that stuff. I learned that 4 months ago. That's the ideal scenario. You don't want to go back and review everything throughout your entire study process. It wouldn't hurt to read everything twice, but it's just going to cost you way too much time. You need to be really efficient in how you study for exam. So the formula is learn it once and learn it pretty well on the first pass, forget about it, and then the final 4 weeks, kind of bring everything together, do a quick review, relatively quick review of everything again, so that it's all stored in that short-term memory for you to memorize formulas and pass the exam. This next one has to do with the difference between Wiley and Kaplan versus Mark Meldrum, and it's a pretty simple answer. A subscriber asked me if it's much more time-consuming to study with Mark Meldrum's paid video lessons and doing the questions from the CFA material, blue boxes, and EOCs, relative to studying with Wiley or Kaplan and doing their video lessons. I said I don't think it's more time consuming. It takes you a while to get through all the Kaplan or Wiley video lessons and their practice questions, and it's going to take you a while to get through all of Mark Meldrum's video lessons and the CFA blue boxes and EOCs. And Mark Meldrum's practice questions aren't actually taken directly from blue boxes and EOCs, so actually when you're going through all of them and doing them yourself, you're going to be extremely familiar with a handful of them because you will have learned them through his video lessons. So I don't think Mark Meldrum's material is any quicker or slower in getting through all the content. It's just a matter of your personal preference in learning. The final question was, what % of your time do you allocate towards practice questions? So obviously you got to learn the material, either read through it, watch the video lessons, read study notes, whatever. What % of your time is used towards the questions rather than studying? And the answer is I have no idea, and it does not matter. You just need to do all of them. You need to do all the, whether they're quiz questions from Kaplan or Wiley or whatever third-party test prep provider you're using. Most importantly, all of the blue box questions and all of the EOC end of chapter questions from the CFA content, you have to do them all. The way this worked for me was that I would go through every section in the quantitative methods book, for example. I would do all of it. I would do the Wiley video lessons, the Wiley study notes, and then the Wiley quizzes. There'd be like 8 quizzes throughout the entire quant book, I believe. Mark down my formulas in my own notes, mark down definitions, bolded words, whatever, all that. Then when I'm completely done with that whole first pass, I go back to the CFA material to go through all the blue box examples and all the EOC questions. Just do all of them. So even if you're being pretty particular about getting in your 3 hours a day and kind of timing the amount of time you spend actually focusing studying, I don't think you should be particular about the amount of time you spend doing what, to be honest. I mean, learn the material, like I said, video lessons or notes, and then do the practice questions, blue boxes or EOCs. It may take you an equally long amount of time to do all the practice questions as it did to learn and pass through the material. I think it was a bit shorter. Maybe it's like 60-40 in reality, but I just don't know, and it's not important. Just make sure that you have enough time scheduled to get through all those things, the material and all the practice questions, and you'll have set yourself up really well to be able to pass the exams. Okay, those are all great questions. If any of these answers helped you out, I'll ask that you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Both of those things help me out, and I appreciate them. And of course, feel free to leave a comment with any questions that you might have for me. I could make a video on them in the next topic. As always, thanks for watching.